Yes, welcome Nikhil. Have a flourish. So you should say flourish and have a glorious morning, right? So that's great. And you too, and you too. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, tuning in from. Happy to have you. And today I want to talk about. I just got back from the gym, by the way. So that's why I'm a little sweaty, all right, and looking a little disheveled and whatever. But it is what it is. I'm live with you. I'm nothing polished, right? We're just here to have a conversation. So, I want to talk today about philosophy versus self-help. And really, my background is in you could say, a field of philosophy. It's value theory, decision theory. Decision theory and value theory kind of stem from philosophy. They're kind of subdivisions of philosophy. They're highly analytical fields, and they study what people value, how people value. Decision theory studies decision making, how people make decisions, how theoretically what is the most rational way to make a decision, and so on and so forth. And so I take a lot of that experience in talking about self-help, and I've seen over the years a lot of the gaps in terms of self-help, personal growth, personal development content. And so the whole problem with self-help today is that most of it's great, by the way, and we have a lot of great content that comes from self-help. I mean, I read a lot of self-help books. I'm just looking at my shelf here, right? And I have benefited a lot from self-help. I've benefited a lot from tips and hacks and tricks. And tell me in the chat if you have, first of all, where you're coming in from in the world, where you're tuning in from, but also what self-help books have helped you. Are there any specific self-help books or personal development books that have made the biggest impact on you? I want to hear about it. But I have a lot of experience. I've probably read over my entire understanding or experience in the business world um, and probably in my entire 10 plus years of business, I've read a lot of self-help books. But the problem with self-help books is that they're based on tips and hacks. Welcome, Awaken Zen. Yes, I'm getting to that now. They're based on tips and hacks. And tips and hacks, you probably are sitting there wondering, why? Why am I not getting results from self-help books? Right? It's very common. You read a self-help book, you don't get results from it. Why? Well, because it's based only on tips and hacks. Tips and hacks do not, and it's been shown in the behavioral sciences, just tips, hacks, rules don't really create behavioral change. Philosophy, on the other hand, and where self-help comes from, and this is where self-help comes from, philosophy, the philosophical tradition, self-help has lost the components of philosophy that are very valuable regarding specific ways to engineer or affect behavioral change. And those are primarily the concept of virtue. And I'll explain this. Why is the concept of virtue so different, and pursuing virtue and having an understanding of virtue different from, hey, use the Pomodoro technique or whatever. Here's this hack from Atomic Habits. Great book, by the way. Make it easier for yourself to engage in a habit, right? Why is that different? How's that different? Well, virtues, going back to Aristotle, right? And even before, classically, virtues ask a different question than tips and hacks and rules do. Rules ask you, what should I do? Right? Okay, you should do this. You should follow these steps. Virtues ask, what kind of person should I be? The virtue tradition asks, what kind of person should I be? And you say, well, why? How is it so different? How is it so different? From a behavioral perspective, it's something called self-consistency theory, right? And you can look up self-consistency theory. Also, Albert Bandura's self-system theory of the self-system, and these are very, very well demonstrated ideas. decades of research have kind of taken a look at these concepts. Thinking in terms of identity change and what kind of person am I and what kind of person I want to become is a lot more effective. It's not just this pie in the sky thing. It's a lot more effective than just trying to implement rules and hacks, okay, which is what a lot of self-help focuses on, right? Now, probably a lot of you will come back and say, yes, well, there are some great self-help books that focus on identity. I agree with you, but they're kind of the minority. Now, how is philosophy, I wouldn't say better, right? It beats, I know the title of this is How Philosophy Beats Self-Help, right? Welcome, I think, Ziad. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, but welcome. So why does it beat out self-help in many ways? Well, because, and I'll just share some examples. When I read Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, right, this is a great book, and I'm going to be doing a longer video on this if you'd like. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a great question, right? How do we make sure we imbibe that identity? Well, so I'm going to use a model. I'm going to present a model that Aristotle used. It's not perfect. There are many approaches to trying to create our identity and create the right identity, right? There are many approaches to this. But one model that Aristotle had was something called the golden mean. He called it the golden mean. And so he would say, okay, in terms of a virtue is, and again, this is not perfect, but it is very helpful, has helped me a lot as well, and when I think about my actions. So he would say a virtue is basically the mean between two extremes. So he used the example, one of the examples he uses in his Nicomachean Ethics is he uses the idea of courage. All right. Well, courage is a virtue, he said. You know, when you're going into battle, for instance, and back then, you know, they were going into battle, so so it was very applicable. But when you're going into battle, you don't want a vice on the one end, on one extreme, of being reckless, right? You're so into taking action, and so, you know, take action so quickly and without thinking that it's brashness or recklessness, and you get into all sorts of trouble, and you get into, you know, you could die in that case, right? Well, he said, okay, that's a vice, right? On one hand, that's one extreme. What's the other extreme, right? He said that the other vice is cowardice. So being so afraid that you don't even allow yourself to take action, you overthink, you overanalyze. And so he said, okay, if we want to find the virtue in each situation, one approach is to find the mean or the average, the middle between those two extremes, right? Now, you can apply this, ask yourself, right? Where can you apply this in your life? Maybe it's, hey, welcome, Harry. So I messaged you, yes, the next 50 books, that's correct. I will get on that list, right? I will work on that list. You have to understand, it's very hard for me to go back and recall all the books I read, and then also think about which ones I think are the best. So I will. Yeah, in Buddhism, that's correct. Awaken Zen. Yeah, in Buddhism they call it the middle way. In fact, in my book, I wrote about Buddhism a little bit from that sense toward the end. I'm not here to promote my book, by the way. That was years ago, and it's anyway. There are things that I disagree with myself on in it anyway at this point. But which works in real life, sir, and helped you the most? Yeah. So I will say, and I will be brutally honest, I think that you have to make a lot of mistakes. I think you actually have to go through a lot of mistakes. I actually was in order to develop a virtue and pain. And that's why a lot of our society today, you look at things like utilitarianism, a lot of our society today, in terms of self help, is based on utilitarianism, which is, uh, maximize happiness, maximize value. And so, because we do that, what happens is we end up not valuing pain. Pain does have a value. So, for instance, there was the hikikomoris in Japan. This is top of my mind because I was just reading about a story about a hikikomori. If you guys know about hikikomori in Japan, these are people who isolate themselves and have kind of withdrawn from society for years, months, and years at a time, and they go through a lot of pain in this process. And but there are hikikomoris who kind of come out of this process, who come out of this lifestyle of withdrawing totally from society, and afterwards they've gone on to help a lot of people to overcome social isolation. And so that's a virtue, but that's a virtue. Can you really, like, the question is, can you really develop that virtue without having experienced that pain yourself? No. So I think sometimes when we experience pain, and self-help, modern self-help doesn't really focus on this enough. Um, when we experience pain, and I can talk about my own life as well, we we should take it in perspective, right? Pain is not, we shouldn't like seek pain. Oh, we should, try to suffer. But whenever we have painful experiences, let's think about how can we use this and what can we learn from it? And Aristotle was big about that, right? Pain creates knowledge, right? Wisdom, he said, is painful. It is painful to pursue wisdom, but nonetheless, we should pursue it. A lot of modern self-help, is talking about the happy life, right? And a lot of modern, I know, like Mark Manson, you know, love the guy. He talks a lot about, revolting against this idea of, just pursuing happiness as a means of a better life and things like that. Aristotle didn't believe that happiness was the key to a better life, right? It's fulfillment, but a different idea than just feeling good and feeling happy. And so, Harry, your question, Farnham Street, I don't know that blog, but I'll check it out. You say, I feel wherever I struggled, I didn't get anything, and where I found things working, I did my best there. What do you think about struggle? Struggle, well, okay, I'll even just share about myself without going into too much detail and being too long about it. My family made and I, years ago, made a huge bet, basically financially, on helping somebody get through a court case, a family friend, get through a court case. We waited for years, struggled for years, suffered for years, went into debt, right? Not financially wise. But what happened is that, and I'm answering your question here. Yeah, Krish, that's true. It's a paradox. If you're seeking happiness, you won't find it. It's true. The seeking acknowledges the lack of it, right? The seeking itself acknowledges the lack. Yeah. Oh, the great mental models. Yes, 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 yes. The great mental models. That's what you're talking about. Yes, I love that. And Rush Hour Reads. Hey there. All right. Welcome, welcome. Happy to have you. So. Uh, Yes, great book. If you want the Great Mental Models, actually, I'm glad you bring up that book because the Great Mental Models is another way to establish virtues, to build virtues, right? It's a great way. So everybody check out that book. Great book. It's another way to establish or build virtues. But to my point, and to answer your question, Hare, from before, right? Why do you struggle and you feel like you don't get results from the struggle? Well, sometimes it's not apparent right away. Right? Sometimes the result doesn't come right away. Case in point, our family went through that really horrible debt struggle. Went into debt. I had massive student loans. I'm not in debt anymore. I'm 100% debt free now, thankfully. And but I was in six-figure debt, really bad debt, and it got to the point that it eventually it affected, I realized looking back, it affected the way I approached money in general. And I would get in the habit of borrowing money or taking out credit. And so you say, oh, well, that didn't create a virtue for you. It created more of a vice for you. It did. But then in the long term, I still ended up from all those experiences, I it ended up that I was able to pay off my debt, all my debts plural. And I'm so much better with managing money, not only better with managing money now, but I'm better with how I approach money in terms of how I treat money, the importance of it in my life, the role of it in my life, and the health of the relationship to it in my life. So and also, when I feel as though I can actually help other people, right, with this kind of issue, not from a professional standpoint, like a financial advisor or whatever, but sharing my experiences and sharing what I went through, I feel that I can help people with that. So the idea of how to develop virtues versus rules and hacks, which are short-term fixes, if anything. One, you do have to. One, you can use that golden mean that I talked about, that Aristotle talked about, right? That golden mean, finding the mean, right, between two vices, finding the middle point between two extremes. And I'd love to hear from people. How can you, for instance, courage is the middle point between, uh, you know, um, cowardice and recklessness, right? How can you use that model in your own life currently, right? What's something that you're struggling with that you could use that model in your own life? And then also, yes, I'm glad that, of course, Hari brought up mental models. Yes, mental models. Read that book. This idea of mental models is a great way to actually cultivate virtues. Mental models. Hari, you said you have vast experience, but your age looks. Yeah, I'm 35. So yes, I'm 35. So I guess I don't know. I mean I've experienced a fair amount. 35 is not too young, right? But it's old enough to experience a fair amount of stuff. But yeah, mental models. Mental models are what we call a heuristic. Okay, a heuristic is like not a scientific model, but it's a shorthand way of approaching something that is very easy to implement. So for instance, Occam's razor, right? Occam's razor is a mental model, or actually let me use a different one. Falsifiability. So falsifiability is kind of a mental model, right? I don't think he even mentions that he mentions a version of that in his book, Mental Models. But again, I urge you guys to get the book, read the book. But uh, yeah, from complexity to simplicity, Occam's razor. Yeah, to some extent, right? But that's more of a rule. I wanted to talk about more of a virtue. So falsifiability. So falsifiability is a way of thinking. It's kind of a scientific way of thinking to avoid cognitive bias, to avoid confirmation bias specifically. So we could set up a rule that, always doubt or something like that. Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I don't know if I'm so whatever. I am just sharing what I know, or sharing my experience. Yeah, exactly. Krish, good point. Good point. So, what was I gonna say? Um, so yeah, mental models, falsifiability. So instead of trying to verify, let's say you believe something, and this is very tough because we have very emotionally held beliefs sometimes. But let's say you believe something, and you really in your heart you believe it. Well, try not to verify it, right? Try not to verify something. Try to look, because that's confirmation bias. Whatever you believe in, you'll see it everywhere. Case in point, if you're thinking about a red car, oh, the red car that you want, suddenly you're going to start to see red cars everywhere. Try it. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced it at some point. But instead of doing that, why not reflect and say, okay, well, how about I just change my thinking in terms of from an identity standpoint? I am a critical thinker. I'm a person who looks to argue against myself, right? To find the truth. I'm a truth seeker, right? And so you might, from that standpoint, get away from confirmation bias, and instead get into the habit of asking the question, okay, so I believe this thing. I believe in X, right? If X is true, then it will survive scrutiny, right? I want to try to prove that wrong. I want to try to prove X wrong. Okay, so that's just a different approach. It's actually the scientific method, right? The law of gravity, guys, is not the law of gravity because it was confirmed so many times, right? Just understand, it's not because it was confirmed so many times. You can confirm any number of things. The law of gravity is a law because there were experiments done to try to disprove it again and again and again, which nothing could disprove it, right? So, Shashwath, so what are some books? Welcome, by the way, and Sandeep, what are some books you can read to gain knowledge? Oh, that's such an open-ended question. If you can come up with a more specific question, because yeah, thanks Rush Hour Reads. Yeah, it's a great way of thinking because it will help us to avoid cognitive biases. And guess what? Well, here's the thing. Actually, I'm doing so many things at once. Shashwath, feel free to like maybe ask a more specific question because I'm not really sure because there are so many. Wisdom is this big category, so. I mean, I could give you 100 books right now. I could tell you 100 different books right now. I don't think you want to hear a list of 100 books, but we can break it down a little bit. That would be great. So yeah, Rush Hour Reads is a great way of thinking because when we think that way, a lot of us are actually, and this speaks to identity as well, and virtue, right? When we have a dearly held belief, right? We are so afraid. It's a habit that we have. We're so afraid of losing that belief. And me too, right? We're all human, right? We have fears of losing deeply held beliefs. You know, what if I'm wrong about my political belief? What if I'm wrong about my religious belief? What if I'm wrong about my my view of science or my view of relationships or my view of people or this moral concept or whatever, deeply held beliefs, and we tend to hold on to them for a very simple reason. We seek stability psychologically. Evolutionarily, we seek stability, right? It makes sense. It makes sense, right? But from a survival standpoint. But we have to start to kind of resist if we identify ourselves as a truth seeker, as somebody who wants wisdom, right? Who wants truth, then we have to get into that habit, right? And that virtue. Habits and virtues are very similar, by the way. I wouldn't say, habits and virtues are exactly the same, but they're quite similar. Virtues are more of a habit of mindset, if you had to say anything about that. But how to remember for long term and for exams. Oof. So, well, okay, going back to identity. Yes, there are a bunch of hacks, but going back to identity, I'm actually good. You know what? I could tell you, Harry, how to remember better and for exams and everything like that. And trust me, I could give you a bunch of hacks like targeted review, group study. I have experience in teaching for years and years and years as well. But so yes, there are some great things for retention. But those things, how will you get yourself to do those things in the first place? Let's just be honest, right? We hear all these tips and hacks, and that's a big part of why self-help isn't working for people, is because we hear a lot of these tips and hacks, and great, it would be great if I could implement them, right? But how will you get yourself to implement them in the first place? That's the block, right? So let's talk about that more importantly, because you can look up things for retention, and there are a lot of great um, uh, techniques. Yeah, I've heard memory palace technique. I've heard some good things about it. I haven't uh, really explored it too much, so I will hold my comment for now, and then I'll explore it and let you know. But you have to ask yourself, why am I pursuing this thing? Why is it worth my yeah, recall study methods are helpful as well. For sure, for sure. Creating associations, right? Emotional associations between terms. Group study, quite honestly, is quite effective, right? Having a social situation, and this has been shown to be very effective. If you're actually discussing the concepts and you're making connections between different concepts, it actually makes them easier to remember. And so so what was I going to say? So yeah, the real question for retention and memory, then let's take a step back, is not what are the tips and hacks and techniques I can use, but how can I why am I why am I pursuing this in the first place? Why do I want to get this good grade? Why do I want to remember this information? Is this information like is somehow connected to my purpose, somehow connected to the vision for my life, right? Right, so you have to ask yourself that very important question first. And then Sandeep, and hey Lisa, welcome. Sandeep, being impeccable with our words, identity shift, start yeah, right, being impeccable with our words. I actually like the four agreements for that reason, even though it's not doesn't have a lot of hacks in it, right? Doesn't have a lot of those things in it. That's very, very helpful, because it actually the four agreements is one of the things that's more based on virtue than hacks and that kind of thing and rules. So Harry, sir, what are your thoughts on dopamine stimulation? Okay, actually, well, let's talk about this. So dopamine, and it's a good jumping off point. Dopamine, serotonin. One thing we have to understand is there are a lot of videos out there, a lot of content about dopamine detox. First of all, don't ever do dopamine detox. Don't try to do that. It's not really effective. There aren't actually any studies, not one study, on the effectiveness of dopamine detox. So you're better off just engaging in things that you somewhat enjoy, right? Let's say you want to play a video game. Play the video game. There's nothing wrong with playing video games. What's wrong with playing video games? As long as you're in control of it and you do it for a specific point in time, right? Then it's not going to distract you too much. It's not going to ruin your focus and concentration. So make a rule for yourself. Okay, you don't have to engage in black and white thinking. Say, I'm gonna watch 20 minutes of videos or TikTok, right? And then I'm gonna get working again. I'm gonna, play 20 minutes or 30 minutes of video game, and then do that. So Naj, is gambling good for you? Good question. No, it's not. So no, it's not. I mean, here's the thing. A lot of things can be addictive. A lot of things can be addictive. You have to make sure that you don't get addicted to gambling. Dopamine, serotonin, these things are not, they don't just have one effect on us, right? So it's just because of dopamine I feel happy, right? It's more complicated than that. Let me just look at more of the comments here. So, but yeah, so dopamine stimulation, its connection to focus and concentration. Don't engage in black and white thinking, right? Your identity should be, okay, well, I'm somebody who maybe is a balanced person. I'm balanced, or yeah, Awaken Zen. That's so I'm looking at all the comments here. Buying a lottery ticket once a week. I mean, okay, so you have to ask yourself the activity. Okay, we can. It's a good question. We can be addicted to, whatever, porn or like lottery or alcohol or eating. There are people who are even addicted to some weird things. There's one guy, a story of one guy who's actually addicted to cycling. He cannot get off of his cycle. He just continues to cycle. It's caused lots of health problems for him. So the thing is that you have to ask yourself, are you in control, right? Awaken Zen, to answer your question, would you are you in control of that? Could you stop at any time and say, okay, I'm not going to buy it this week. I don't want to buy it, right? I think that actually is the gauge of whether it's good for you or bad for you, whether you're in control of the behavior or not. Yes. So, Krish, you're correct. Regarding dopamine, avoiding instant gratification is so much better than dopamine detox. Yeah. So, dopamine and serotonin have this relationship to each other where they interact. A lot of stuff is said about dopamine, not enough is talked about serotonin, right? Serotonin actually helps you feel a sense of contentment, and it's not all it does. It does a lot of things, and dopamine does a lot of things too. But we have to remember dopamine helps you feel motivated as well, right? Motivated, it actually helps you seek pleasure, it helps you seek outcomes and goals. But understand it does not help you, and this is key, it does not help you feel content once you have reached the goal. All right? And that's why a lot of us, right? Can you agree? Yeah, let's get back to philosophy. um, yes. So anyway, um, that's why the feeling of contentment. I'll get back to philosophy. That's why the feeling of contentment. Uh, you can't rely on dopamine for that. You basically will crash and burn if you seek just pleasure all the time. But on that point, yes, okay, let's talk about actually I was going to get into a little bit of Epicureanism. So you're talking about embracing pain. I'm trying to address everybody's foster courage. Okay, let's try to put these into integrate this. So Epicureanism. Yes, I have thoughts on Epicureanism. Epicureanism is different from utilitarianism, like Jeremy Bentham, John Stuart Mill. If you guys are familiar with, the utilitarians, modern utilitarians, so to speak, pre-modern. Now, Epicurus had a different view of happiness than we would say today. He did not talk about really maximization of happiness. That was not how he thought of happiness. He thought of it more as a qualitative thing than a quantitative thing. Modern utilitarianism looks at it as a quantitative thing. Epicurus said, for instance, and let's talk about courage as well in a bit. But Epicurus said, for instance, yes, you can enjoy food, right? The best food, right? And you can feel satisfied and feel lots of pleasure, a luxurious meal. But you will feel unhappy and unfulfilled ultimately. You may, right? If you're not enjoying with other people, right? He said one of the most important things is to connect with other people. There's a lot of research on this. He said that the best meal, you can have the simplest meal with a small group of people that you confide in and you connect with and you are truly friends with, and that will make you truly happy. And so his idea of happiness was less the kind of, you might say, dopamine driven, pleasure seeking happiness. It was more of that contentment, which, yes, he said you should avoid pain, but the kind of life he was talking about in terms of avoiding pain still wasn't the modern conception. It was more of, he said peace of mind. Peace of mind is really the most important outcome that we can seek. It wasn't this overstimulated, happy all the time kind of conception. So I think Epicurus was onto something. I don't think a lot of these philosophies are mutually exclusive. I think Epicurus did have a key point there. In fact, Epicurus was against, he would go into the marketplace and people were buying and selling things, and he said, and he and his followers actually famously etched into one of the walls of I believe it's still there in the ruins of the marketplace in Greece. They etched into the marketplace something, I forget, something like, this, just remember, this will not make you happy, right? So the idea of happiness was not like the modern quantitative utilitarian happiness. So the way we use words is very important. I would say Epicurus, maybe happiness is not even the right translation for what he thought we should pursue in life. But very, very important to explore these philosophies, embracing pain. And I think actually Epicurus would agree that pursuing things like courage, embracing pain in certain circumstances, even the modern utilitarians, by the way, would say that sometimes embracing smaller pains in order to get greater rewards is really worth it. So to foster courage, I think you just have to go out and do it. I mean, it sounds too simple, but you have to commit to do something today, right? I know we're having a great conversation, but we have to commit to go out and do something and overcome the fear, right? If what it takes is getting in these kinds of environments to motivate you, to push you, right, to go out and impact somebody's life, have an impact on somebody's life, to do something, that you believe is virtuous and right today, to help somebody, then you should do it. You should do it. So that is those are my thoughts about self-help and philosophy for today. Guys, feel free to subscribe to a lot of to see more of my other content. And I do this every Wednesday. I do this every single Wednesday. So, and by the way, hold on. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Yeah, and by the way, if you want to work with me personally, the link is in my bio to check out what I do. I help people through the Life Navigator system, develop goals, develop a complete personalized personal development plan, and actually execute and have accountability to execute on those goals. So feel free to check that out. And yes, can I make a video on this topic? I have a list of topics that I want to make videos about, but I actually, it is potentially a good topic to discuss. What, Epicureanism, you mean? Is that what you mean, Awaken Zen? Epicureanism? Or do you mean some other topic? Yeah, I'll wait. I'll wait to see what you say, but let's see. Just philosophy overall. I'm going to be making a video coming up on actually on the topological fallacies and how to avoid them soon, and then I'll be doing some more philosophy content coming up as well. Yeah. Okay, great. So I will. I may be a really good topic that a lot of people will enjoy and benefit from, Awaken Zen. So I will definitely consider that. Guys, thank you for tuning in and spending time together today. And I look forward to spending more time with you guys soon and next week. And be sure to tune into my videos and be sure to tune in every week. Appreciate you guys. Take care.